think very often we hear how people say Gen Z is lazy,
they don't want to work.
Loyal.
We need to help people managers become more servant leaders, more empathetic, and more situational around how they lead different people. That's one of the greatest opportunities with Gen Z. One of the problems we have in previous generations, we just accepted certain things.
Hi everyone, welcome to HR and Beyond. In today's episode, we are exploring one of the hottest topics in HR right now, the multi-generational workforce. We will be focusing particularly on Gen Z, a generation that is often misunderstood but has full of potential.
And today we have my dear friend and ex-colleague with us in the studio, Allan. Allan has over 15 years of experience in HR, building high-performing teams, working with the leadership and accelerating their development. He also has a really fun and engaging TikTok and Instagram channel where he gives some career advice, so follow him for this, Career Uncle. Allan, welcome to studio. We're really excited to have you here with us and discuss this hot topic of Gen Z and multi-generational workforce.
Thank you for having me.
So let's kick it off. I think, as I told, Gen Z is one of the generation which is misunderstood. At the same time, we know that in decade, it's going to be 1/3 of our workforce. Yeah, like we cannot avoid it or escape. Why do you think it's such a hot topic, and how have you seen it play out in real life?
Yeah, it's a really hot topic because I think that there's always, whenever a new generation is coming into the workplace, there's always a lot of hype. I mean, we saw that with millennials when they entered the workforce, but there's a lot of hype, and I'd say a lot of the hype is justified with Gen Z. I think looking at it in terms of my personal experience, we've seen a lot of challenges, both from companies trying to attract, engage, retain Gen Z talent into the workforce, and also from a Gen Z talent perspective, integrating well into the workforce. So there's some real friction challenges, and we're seeing that across different cultures. We're seeing that in countries like Japan, which are very traditionally very conformist societies. We're seeing that across the board. Some challenges with Gen Z integrating into the workforce much more than previous generations. So in terms of my personal interest and where I come at this is that I've been working on this challenge professionally, firstly, within the last couple of companies I've worked in, had to deal with this challenge both as a head of HR and a head of talent, and to think about the systems, processes, structure, culture that engages, retains, and attracts Gen Z. So I've had to deal with this professionally, but also I've had to work with clients and partners on how they navigate this challenge. So I've designed workshops and helped both people who are Gen Z as well as people managers navigate this challenge. And I think why this is such an important topic, it's important for society because so much of our society is already Gen Z. I think it's 27% of the global workforce. In the US, it's 18% of the workforce in the US already. And so it's only going to grow. So when you think about this challenge, it's only going to get bigger as more and more Gen Z enter the workforce and other generations start retiring and exiting the workforce. So we have to deal with this at a society level. We have to deal with this in terms of helping companies become better and more inclusive of Gen Z talent. And we have to help our Gen Z talent as well. So this is why I think it's such an important topic. And one more thing I'll say is that I think with Gen Z coming into the workforce, there's some challenges, but there's some real opportunity. And those opportunities include the fact that they are digital and technology natives, and they have grown up in an age of hyperpersonalization. So they expect things to be much more employee-centric or centric to their needs. And they have less tolerance for inefficiency on processes and technology. So I think them coming in has some fantastic opportunities in the workplace for us to reshape how workplaces should operate.
Yeah, so true. I mean, myself as HR, I also hear a lot of myth and stereotypes around Gen Z. I think very often we hear how people say Gen Z is lazy,
they don't want to work.
Loyal. Exactly. Like how have you experienced it? What do you think are some myths and misconceptions about this generation?
Yeah. So look, I think there are some general trends and look, I think everyone's an individual, so we cannot label everyone who's Gen Z the same, but there are some general trends in Gen Z. And I think when we push them too far, they can become myths, especially when we don't understand context and understand background. And we also sometimes, when we think about lazy and entitled, which is some of the things that get bandied about Gen Z, it's often coming from a different generational lens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, just to give some context here, if you look at most people managers, they're maybe older millennials or Gen X, right? Typically now, and they've grown up in an age and a time where, when they were working, they had to not always be happy at work, get your head down, work hard, and if you worked hard and you were lucky, after 2 or 3 years, you might get promoted. But the point is, at work, you had to go through lots of period of time where you're unhappy. And things are not always great at work, and you're not always developing, and you're not always growing, and you just get on and do with it. You conform, basically. And so when you have that lens and that background, as many of our people managers do, and many of us have, and then you look at Gen Z who maybe want to get promoted after 6 to 9 months, don't necessarily want to work outside hours because they have much more focus on mental health and work-life balance. That creates a kind of a narrative and a narrative or a mantra from other people saying, "Oh, you're lazy, you're entitled, you don't want to work hard." And look, I think we have to go away from some of these labels and really look at the reality and say, hey, we have to maybe take some empathy and curiosity and understanding as to why Gen Z think this way. So some of the characteristics we're seeing is that, yes, they have much more focus on mental health. Because they grew up in the age of hyperpersonalization, they are used to things being tailored to them, and so you have to have empathy for the situation they're in, and so they want to be treated much more as individuals than as a collective, and that's another challenge. They're an activist generation, so they're much more likely to protest. They're much more likely to want to work for purpose-driven companies and companies that really are good at corporate social responsibility and things like that. Those are some of the kind of key traits we're seeing, and obviously we talked about promotions and as well. So that's those are some of the traits we're seeing. Now, are they myths? I think there can be myths because they lack context for why they think the way they think, basically.
I've certainly seen at my workplace how Gen Zs question certain protocols, and I really like that because a lot of times we just do because we've been told to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's that's one of the greatest opportunities of Gen Z. They will question what the previous generations just acquiesced and conformed. A lot of the time, one of the problems we have in previous generations, we just accepted certain things. So I'll give you a good example of that. We've gotten used to the mantra almost, or the kind of the way it works, that you cannot get promoted. You generally can't get promoted less than 2 years, 2 to 3 years each promotion cycle, maybe, if you're lucky and if you work hard. But Gen Z are questioning that and saying, hey, if I'm already operating at the competency of the next level, why can't I get promoted after 6 to 9 months? Now, we can have our opinions about whether that's too soon. But one thing I would say, it's definitely healthy to question whether the 2 to 3 year thing is the correct model. And whether we think it's the correct model or not, we're going to have to start adapting if we want to attract, engage, and retain Gen Z. And so what some companies are doing, for example, is on the promotion cycle, is reimagining their structures. And even can they, instead of designing big jumps of promotion, can you have mini jumps to then satisfy Gen Z? Can we think about job rotation better and differently? Can we be more fluid in terms of career movement? Because Gen Z want more variety and development, and they want it regularly and constantly. And if they didn't get it, they're unhappy. So I think these are good things. So there's some really good opportunity coming along with Gen Z coming into the workforce.
Yeah, they're just forcing us to rethink the work, the culture, and even how we communicate with them. One thing I've noticed is that I do like face-to-face discussions with my colleagues, but some of our Gen Zs are like, okay, can you send me a message and I will respond to that.
WhatsApp, right?
Yes.
It's the new way of communication versus email.
Yeah. And on that, Aya, I think that's a great example where, again, all our generations have preferences around how we communicate. But if I'm honest about it, and I've reflected on in my corporate background, working in big multinational companies, let's be honest, we probably sat in meetings that should have been an email.
Oh, it's so true.
You know, we spent an hour or half an hour in meetings where actually it would have been better and more efficient to do an email. Now, you can't substitute email for every meeting because there's also something to be said for the relationship building, for the alignment, for the just discussion. But there are definitely times where we could be more efficient. And that's, a great opportunity with Gen Z coming in for us to become more efficient with how we work.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you mentioned, the topic of hyper-personalization.
Yeah.
I think we also talked with you being expert in benefits field and space, that it's actually more and more common for people to want something more customized versus standard.
Yeah.
So have you seen what are the good examples of
Yeah.
that? How can we translate it actually into company policies and frameworks? Like this desire for hyper-personalization.
So I would say to you, I'm not an expert on this, but the way I think about it from a conceptual lens is maybe making sure that our benefits are not just utilitarian for everyone, and sometimes things need to be utilitarian and universal, but also we allow flexibility. Because the reality, if you think about it, just from a pure conceptual point of view, companies invest a certain amount of monies per employee for the benefits, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's pension or gym membership or whatever.
Yeah.
And so every employee has a number attached to them in terms of benefits. Now, the way to think about it, just even leave aside the human element, just think about it in terms of just how a good finance person would think about it. Are we getting the optimal ROI for the investment we're making? Are the benefits we're giving to the employee being used? Is it appropriate for them? Can we be smarter about how we invest that money so it's more meaningful? We give these benefits, or companies give these benefits for employees as kind of quid pro quo. They're giving it to make sure we engage and retain the employee and do the right thing for the employee. But also and that in turn gives us great productivity and engagement from the employee, who's more likely to stay and work harder if they feel they're being rewarded right. And if the reward we're giving them isn't quite right for them, then we need to relook at that. So the way I think about it conceptually is that making sure we structure benefits so they're flexible, they apply for people at different life stages and different life circumstances. And so a very simple example is what some of the tech companies are doing, where they give monies to women, for example, who want to freeze their eggs. As a great example, right? It's just, and not necessarily a Gen Z thing, but it's a great way of thinking about it from an employee-centric point of view. I
agree. I think studying demographics, your own demographics, is very important. Often I see companies do a lot of benchmarking, what in this industry does, let's just mirror. But you do need to personalize those benefits according to your employees' needs.
Exactly. And I think you can look at it from different angles, right? I think in my view, you want to be quite holistic about it. Yeah. So you want to obviously look at it in terms of industry benchmarking, because that's one key data point. You want to look at it in terms of just how you're investing the dollars. But then also you want to look at it in terms of looking at your employee demographics and actually talking to them, and actually getting feedback from them. And thinking about, like, again, going back to just good finance principles. How can we invest our money so it's optimal in terms of return on investment and impact for our employees? If we take those principles, then I think a lot of companies can think about the way they invest their benefits in a much better way for employees.
And one thing you mentioned earlier, that mental health for Gen Z is particularly important. Yeah. I'm curious to hear from, I guess, you, why is it so?
Okay, so I'd say I'm going to say something a little bit controversial here, but I think this sort of, firstly, it's generally a good thing. Yeah. So I think that what's happened over time, society as a whole has become much more aware of mental health, right? I mean, I'm from London, or from the UK, right? And in the UK, Prince William has talked about it a lot. Public figures talked about it a lot. It's become much more healthy to talk about.
I think even in Asia, we see.
Yeah, exactly. So society as a whole has moved that way. But then what's happened is Gen Z have grown up only knowing that. So what's happened, and many of our earlier generations, have not grown up with mental health being a normal topic or being talked about openly.
Just work hard.
And sometimes
don't complain.
Don't complain. Just get your head down. You might have a little cry in the corner, but you've got to get on with it. And there's a balance on these things, right? Because sometimes, and it's tricky, it's situational, but sometimes that's what you need to do. Is sometimes it is right to seek mental health support and to do the right thing for yourself. So it's a good thing overall. It really is a good thing. And it allows us, because they've got such a focus on mental health, I think it allows us to build more inclusive workplaces, more empathetic and understanding workplaces. But there is a challenge because they have such a focus on mental health. There's also that risk, right? The risk is they can sometimes on average, and this doesn't apply across the board, but they can be a little bit more sensitive, a little bit unable. They don't necessarily have the coping mechanisms or the resilience, you could argue, some of them that previous generations have because they're used to. They've grown up in society in a society in a generation where when they're deeply unhappy, they're like, oh, my mental health, and I've got to take a time off work or something. Which again, I don't want to criticize that, but there's challenges and opportunities if we think about it.
Yeah. In that case, how organizations can support those employees so that they're more resilient, stronger when it comes to difficult situations?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. I think that if you think of it from an organizational point of view, I think the most important thing, in my opinion, I mean, there's a couple of things, but the most important thing is leadership capability. So particularly of people managers, I think that we need to develop more servant leadership, or we need to help people managers on a whole become more servant leaders, more empathetic and more situational around how they lead different people. And I think that if you look at, I don't want to be too broad, but this is generally the case. I think many people managers, again, because they've grown up in their sort of Gen X or older millennial times, they're used to treating people. Their concept of fairness, for example, I'll give you a simple example. Their concept of fairness is much more like, I treat people the same. So I treat people
how I want to be
treated.
Yes.
And that's fair. And then I'm consistent with how I treat people. And I think we can all agree that consistency is generally a good thing. But I think because they've grown up, that's how they were treated, that they should be consistent. And I think that the tension point is with Gen Z who want to be treated in a slightly different, tailored way. So I think the main thing is to help managers develop more empathy and more awareness of why they think the way they think. I mean, why even the manager thinks the way they think. What environment did they grow up in, and what environment did Gen Z grow up in?
Yeah.
And I think for me, the way I think about it is developing generational awareness of the trends, but then also being aware of intersectionality and bias, and being aware of not judging, having humility that sometimes what you think in your opinion can be wrong, being curious about other people broadly as a generation, but also curious about people at an individual level. And also being able to coach and give feedback, right? And also being able to, and coaching and feedback is a key one, because being able to help people develop those coping mechanisms, help people develop resilience. Again, it's not all in the manager, but I think the manager is a key differentiator. If we can develop great managers, then that's a key way to helping, I think, Gen Z employees develop some of these tools and skills.
I'm loving what I'm hearing. And I completely agree with you that
I think
the top-down approach is required.
It's a challenge to coach manager, because all the things you listed, it's like we will completely agree on it. But it's such an individual, personal level to change this mindset.
Yeah.
So I wonder, maybe you've seen good examples or bad examples in the workplace, how it was done. Like we as HR, how can we support managers? In addition to having workshop about generations, right? Because like the things you talked about, empathy, humility, in the end, it's your individual responsibility. So I think where I'm struggling with is where there is our responsibility as an organization to instill those values into people, and where it stops that.
Yeah,
so a lot of it is take responsibility.
Yeah, no, thank you, Naila. I think a lot of it is, so I talked about the manager, right? But I think we can look at it as a kind of an organizational level. And some of the things I've been looking at in my career, but also I know a lot of HR leaders are looking at, and some companies are doing this better than others, and every company's on a journey. But the way I think about it is if you're a policymaker, so we work in HR, but if you're a policymaker, you influence policy, which is pretty much everyone in HR. I think about it in sort of three buckets, right? And this is the way I've distilled it in my head. Firstly is on policy. So policy is like, what's our work from home policy? What's our return to office or being in the office policy? Or what's our flexible working policy, right? And because those can have very big impacts. And then what's our benefits, right? And we talked about benefits earlier. The second one, I think, is around structure, systems, and technology processes. So how do we do internal mobility? How do we do promotions? Are we structured from a a job framework and a career framework perspective to enable smaller jumps and smaller promotions? Does our organization have the agility and the culture to allow people to move from, say, marketing to sales, or vice versa, or to product, or to whatever function? Do we allow that kind of agility? And sometimes that it's a culture thing as well as a process thing. So is the TA team able to, for example, influence managers? And then do we encourage, for example, things like not just job rotations, but do we encourage people to, for example, do job shadowing? And do we have that culture? So some of it is cultural and some of it is kind of that process and system. And the third thing is capability. And capability is like manager capability, which we talked about already. But it's also kind of organizational capability. So we think about it from HR capability standpoint. Do we do really good talent management? Do we have a view on who our great talent is, especially early in career? Have we got a view on what their strengths are and also their development gaps and how we can accelerate those? Are we systematic and structured? And are we really smart about how we develop and grow our talent? So I think those are some of the things that I think we can look at organizationally. And then when you look at the people manager, it's not a one and done workshop. I mean, the workshop's a great starting point in terms of how to manage Gen Z, but it's, have we got an ongoing program? Have we got an ongoing engagement? Have we got ongoing feedback loops?
Yeah.
Do we have a culture of feedback? Because another thing with Gen Z is they want two-way feedback, which, by the way, we should always demand two-way feedback. But a lot of the time feedback, if it happens, is one way, it's top down.
Yeah.
But it has to be two-way because that's the right thing. But that's also what Gen Z demand. So are we building that in? And finally, last thing I'll say is, and it goes back to kind of the third thing around capability, is do we have robust performance management? Are we really equitable and fair? Are we really meritocratic? Are we measuring kind of qualitative and quantitative metrics? Are we robust? Do we have really good performance calibration processes? Because that fairness is really important for everyone, but especially for Gen Z. So I think all these things are really important to put in systematically to help drive that cultural change.
Yeah, basically. I love this framework. I think once I go back to work Monday, I'll think of how to assess, right, even how it works in my teams and organization. Because often, as you told, it depends how it translates in different teams depending on the leader and manager. Yes, so making sure we try to apply it consistently. It's important.
Yeah, no, sorry. One more thing to add on that, Naila, I should say, is on the performance management. Even like when we're training managers, are we giving them the feedback on how they're coming across? Are we seeking feedback from their teams? Should we have multiple feedback? And if a manager's showing good leadership, empathy, and situational leadership, are we rewarding and recognizing them? And equally, those that are being slower to adapt, are we giving them the right feedback, and are we holding them accountable? So these all the systems and processes, I think it's very carrot and stick. How we shift human behavior, a big part of that is carrot and stick systems.
Yeah.
And so people do what they're motivated to do. So that's kind of a key thing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like how our conversation shift from Gen Z to actual policies which are beneficial for everyone, right? So maybe having new generation playing out in the workforce, it is a positive thing, right? Because it forces us, it's kind of like a trigger for us to rethink how we do things.
Absolutely. And there's so many things that we, previous generations, just got so used to. We talked about the promotion already, but there's so many things we got so used to, and it's just accepting. I'll give you one example I heard about. So I know in Japan, like as I've been dealing a lot with the Japanese, sometimes, and this happens in all workplaces, but especially in Japan, where there can be very old paper-based processes, for example, around, and you've got to fill out a form.
Yes. Yeah.
Send it to HR.
And sometimes even ask for facts.
And sometimes, exactly. And Gen Z is saying, no, why are we doing this? This is BS. Like, this is slow. Doesn't make sense, inefficient, and it's expensive. Yeah. But I think we all just go, oh, it's the way it is. Gen Z don't. So the great thing is that with their push, we can just make better, more efficient workplaces.
We now talked about how organizations and ourselves, people of all the generations, can make it more inclusive for Gen Zs. Which advice would you give to Gen Zs to push for a change, and also some things to be mindful of. Yeah, I think one of the things you mentioned is about mental well-being. Like, do I, as a person who's younger, have to cultivate resilience? Yeah, for example.
So I think that if I'm giving advice specifically to Gen Z, I think just reiterate one of the things I said earlier is like humility, empathy, and curiosity. Because, and again, I think this applies universally to human beings, because we generally, as humans, we tend to have quite strong we can develop quite strong opinions about things, and that becomes our truth. Yeah. And it can be very difficult to shift us away. And one thing I have observed, because I've gotten to know a lot of Gen Z people, some of them on my family, right? And one thing I've observed, which I found a little bit different to other generations, is they can often have quite confident opinions on things, which I think is brilliant, by the way. I think is a great thing. I love their confidence. Their self-confidence is a great thing that many of our other generations take inspiration from. But the risk on the self-confidence is they can sometimes close off space from listening or being curious about other people's opinions or other people's perspectives. And I was talking to a young lady the other day who I know quite well, and she was telling me about her mother, who works really long hours working for a big marketing company. And she said, when I'm working, and she's at university, there's no way I'm going to work outside hours. She was so certain about the way she said that. What's the point? Why would you work more hours than your contracted hours? She said it in such a strong way that there was no room for understanding. I know she's empathetic for her mum, but she has no understanding why a company would expect or demand people to work outside hours. She literally had what I would say a closed mind on that. And I think it's important to say, okay, I have an opinion, but could I be wrong? Could I ask questions? Could I speak to someone who's Gen X or a baby boomer or a millennial and ask them why they think the way they think, what their values, what shaped the way you think? How did you grow up? What was it like? What was the workplace like when you grew up? And just develop a bit of space and humility for that you may not be right.
Yeah,
I think that's such an important thing. So I think that mindset shift, I think, is important in everyone, but for Gen Z for sure, and for people managers. That's a key piece of advice. And then I think that's the starting point, because once you have that, you can understand around what does resiliency mean. What is there an opportunity for me to develop more resiliency with how I operate, observing others and having curiosity how others, especially in other generations, operate and think about these topics.
Okay, guys, how about we pause and play some game called Talk Like a Gen Z. So no pressure.
It's going to be difficult.
I'll throw out a few terms that Gen Z use often, and you need to tell me what it means.
Okay, let's try. I
see.
think I'll fail.
I'll definitely fail.
Okay, I'll start with something simple.
Okay.
Slay.
Something cool. Yes?
Yes, to do something exceptionally well or look amazing. So you can say, you totally slayed that presentation. Okay. I hear this often, actually.
Yeah. Slay, I've definitely heard, I think, on TikTok also and social media.
Yeah.
Oh, this one I like. Riz.
Riz is when you shut up. Isn't it when you, isn't that when you...
Actually, I don't know this
when
one.
When you are chatting up someone. No?
No.
It's not?
Riz.
I actually recently heard it as well. R-I-Z-Z.
First time I hear.
It's a charisma.
Ooh.
So if somebody tells you got some riz, it means that you have a charisma.
Okay.
Oh, right. The reason I thought that, I've seen it in the context of people. Oh, you can riz when you chat.
Maybe charisma, like charisma riz.
Maybe.
Yeah, you short
Yeah.
I'm not sure how this came up.
Short for that. Yeah.
This one I heard. Sus.
Sus.
You seem sus.
Suspect.
Yeah.
Suspicious.
Suspicious.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, this one is difficult. I didn't know about it too. ICK.
ICK.
Ick. I got ick. Isn't it when you? Isn't that when you're like, oh, I know. Again, with attraction, a little bit like, oh, that person's giving me the ick. Like I'm not. I'm getting turned off.
Good one.
Okay.
Yeah, something that suddenly turns you off.
Okay.
So ICK. Okay, this is all. I'm not gonna torture you more.
I think it's not bad, no? 50-50.
That's not bad. That's not bad. Yeah.
Which is your favorite so far?
Okay, I think Riz, because I didn't know Riz, about this.
Yeah. I've heard Riz before, but I didn't know it in that broader context, but that's good. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and it's easy to remember. Charisma, Riz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll use it next time when you
I'll
speak
try,
to Gen Z.
yes, I'll try to use it with Gen Z. Let's see if they're gonna be impressed or they're gonna have ick. The older generation is trying to use the words. Yes, exactly.
Leave it there.
Let's see. Okay, fun game. So I think to wrap up and close our conversation, let's end it on the positive note. There are definitely challenges, as you shared, when new generation is coming to the workforce. Probably in 10 years, we're going to have the same conversation about Gen Alpha.
Yeah.
And Gen Z will be thinking how to include them. So what gives you hope when we think of multi-generations in the workplace? Yeah, and what do you think are the positive things which actually can come out of it?
Yeah, I think to summarize, I think it really is that opportunity to build more inclusive workplaces that are more empathetic on mental health, where we have more empathetic leadership. I think that's a really big push, where we have better feedback systems and feedback culture. That's a huge opportunity, honestly, for companies. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is really more efficient processes, systems, ways of working, technology. I think that the new generation coming in is not accepting, won't be accepting of inefficient processes, or have much less tolerance for it. So I think that's going to be good for everyone. Yeah. So I think those, for me, are probably the biggest opportunities. But I think the last thing is just that, we mentioned this earlier, is just questioning the unquestionable, or questioning things that previous generations just accepted, even though they're not very good. I think we just have a great opportunity to reimagine the workplace, reimagine things like promotion, reimagine access to senior leaders. I mean, when we were growing up, it's very hierarchical, right? But this generation is much less hierarchical. So they want access to senior leaders, and they don't understand why they can't just go and speak to senior leader. And actually, if you think about it, that's true, that's fair. Whereas we grew up with much more hierarchy, and then we worked hard, and maybe after a few years or a number of years, we might be able to speak to a senior leader at some point. That's not a good thing. But it's a good thing that we do get young people much more access to senior leaders. So these are great opportunities we have, I would say.
Yeah, I love it. Empathy and efficiency, 2 E's.
And my key takeaways, it's not just understanding, I guess, the needs of different generation, but how can we actually put that into practice so that we can understand and act on it, especially during the challenging times.
For sure.
True. Thank you so much, Allan. I personally took away a lot of insights. As I told, on Monday, I'll go and reassess certain things, and we'll make sure to use some slang from Gen Z. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Have some riz.
Have some riz, yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Allan.
Thank you.
That's all for today's episode of HR and Beyond.
Please subscribe, follow, and recommend us to your friends and colleagues.
We would love to hear your thoughts or questions. Connect with us on LinkedIn or send us a message.
As we say in Kazakhstan,
Alga, which means onward. Take care, and until next time.